Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Review Realm. John here. We have a big release for you. As we said, January is jam packed. We're just banging them out here, and we have maybe the biggest one of January thus far that we're going to have. And as always, with me joining me in these album reviews, I'm sure he's excited about this one that we're about to talk about here in just a sec. Before we get to that, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Really helps us out with these album reviews, and let us know your thoughts too about these albums in the comments below. But where was I getting? Oh yeah, I was introducing my co-host in all these album reviews, Sam.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am super excited for this one. We're talking about a big one. Arguably, I would say one of the most important releases of the year. So,
Definitely, and we're starting right off with it in January. They announced this months and months ago. And what we're talking about today, of course, is Megadeth and their self-titled new album, and most importantly here, their last album ever, which was part of, I think, why they announced it so far advanced earlier in 2025. Like, this is a big deal that
mhm.
Megadeth is not going to be around uh, anymore at some point in the near future. Yeah, so this was big.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I've seen interviews with him. I saw him on Rogan a couple years back, and Dave, I mean, he's taken care of himself in the past 20 years, but he has a history going back into the 90s and 80s of his like drug use, drug abuse, drinking issues. And I'm assuming even though you take care of yourself, there comes a point where like it starts to age you. So yeah, last album, they did say at least the tour is going to be long. They said that at least. So even though this is the last album, we will be getting a lot of Megadeth shows this year or the coming years, honestly.
I think also too what I think Dave has been really having trouble with as of late is he's been having a lot of pain in his hand, either one hand or both hands. I'm not sure, but he says it's starting to get to him, and it is affecting the way that he plays. So I'm sure he doesn't want to live with that discomfort, for the rest of his life. I think he recognized the point where, all right, because initially this was not intended to be the last album. He said that they probably could keep going, but he does not want to live with that, that discomfort. And he said at some point it was decided, hey, like, yeah, this is it.
Yeah, he could. I mean, realistically speaking, you could do he could record more music. You don't have to tour for it. As much as I love seeing, we've seen Megadeth several times, and I think they've always put on a good show. And that's kind of where the wear and tear comes down. If he was to record music, you could still do it. But if this is his decision, that's perfectly fine. And I'm looking. We should just jump right into it because we have a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, and I just want to say lastly here before we get into it that, saying that this is the last album, and a lot of bands do that these days. They say this is it, farewell, like 20 farewell tours. But for some reason with him, I believe him.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
sincerely believe, especially, I could jump a little ahead, but especially with the way that this album ends, I firmly believe that this is it for them. But
Hmm.
like you said, Sam, yeah, let's dive right into it here. Last album for Megadeth, 11 songs, about 47 minutes in total. Yeah, they put out a few singles here. I think four singles, which is that's what bands do these days. They just release single, single, single. Uh,
I was shocked. So just to kind of go through this, the first one came out Tipping Point in October on the 3rd. And then we literally got another one beginning of the week, the 19th. And I was like, why are we dropping a new single? Like, we're there. I wasn't mad. I was just like, oh, all right, that's really close.
Right, yeah, you mentioned Tipping Point, which was the first one, and of the 4 singles that they dropped for this album, that's the best one. I really liked that
Mhm.
as a single. The production on it, starting off the album, I think it sounds clean and it sounds like, uh, Megadeth, and I especially love that breakdown like they do at the
Mhm.
end. I've never heard Dave do that before with his voice, so I really liked it.
The one thing I think Megadeth is consistently good at even on their bad albums, is how to start an album. So Tipping Point, even being I believe it's the opening track on the album, really kicks us into high gear. And yeah, it was an incredible single, arguably the best one.
Yeah, because it gets us into the next one, which is coincidentally the next track too. I don't care. And see, this one, Sam, I was not crazy about this one. I know Megadeth does stuff like this, with the like lyric wise and stuff like that. Like sweating bullets, for example. Hello, me, meet the real me.
Mhm.
But I don't really care for when they sound like this. How do you feel about it?
So, Sweating Bullets arguably is I think it's one of my favorite Megadeth tracks. It's just so
Yeah.
out there. But you got to remember that was 30 something years ago. This one, and I would even argue the next single, there's something about the music. I didn't mind the music. I'm like, all right, this is kind of some, Dave Mustaine going, hey, let's play around. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's do Megadeth things to see what we can concoct. Um, but it really comes down to the lyrics, I think. Little teenage angst, which, and maybe I'm just getting older. Like, it's one thing if I'm listening to like a younger band and they're doing that, or I'm listening to bands when they were younger. Like if this was a Megadeth song, maybe in like the 80s. All right, cool, I get it. But there's something about it when you're in your 60s or it's kind of like Machine Head. When Machine Head puts out certain songs, and you and I are like, the music's great, but I don't know what you're doing here with with the lyrics.
Yeah, and I felt that way. I just felt that way about I Don't Care, and it's definitely the song on the album that does it the most.
Hmm.
And then the other 2 singles that they dropped was Let There Be Shred and Puppet Parade. I'm wondering, I don't know why they chose these as singles. They were not I think they were the weaker points of the album for me.
So it's funny you bring that up. So we're gonna actually have a disagreement here on Puppet Parade here
Okay.
because I saw the title and I'm like, I heard the other two singles, and let me just preface with saying that this is not a bad album. This is not on the bottom tier of the Megadeth albums, I would argue. I'm like, Puppet Parade, that sounds kind of cheesy again. Um, this is one of the singles, and there's a couple other singles on this we'll talk, or a couple other songs where I loved the chorus. It had that like countdown to extinction Megadeth melody. Cause yeah, the verse was like, all right, cool, cool. And then the chorus kicked in. I'm like, oh, this sounds like, countdown to extinction Megadeth. So I actually really like Puppet Parade. For me was actually, I'd argue, my second favorite single.
Puppet Parade, and another song too reminded me a lot of, like, kind of what you said, Sam, like, Hey
Mhm.
God was another one too.
Yes.
It reminded me a lot of Symphony of Destruction.
Yes.
I think Puppet Parade, I think it might have been the chorus. I said, "This the way that it's the melody of it or whatever, it sounds like Symphony of Destruction to me."
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah. And I don't know if that was like an influence. Um, it's something I don't hear Megadeth do too often with these melodic choruses anymore. I can't think, and I re-listened to the whole discography. Um, but personally, I kind of liked this edition. Whereas like, all right, we're gonna do a little bit of a call. If this is your last album, we'll do like a callback to some of our older stuff.
yeah, so the album started off really strong for me, and I'll be honest too, Another Bad Day is where it was starting to lose me a
Hmm.
little bit, and this is where I kind of wanted to have more info from you on, like, if this was to be expected from them, because I think Another Bad Day was another, like, kind of a cheesy one lyric-wise a little bit.
Uh, a little bit, a little bit. There's something about the choruses though, with the way the melodies worked, where when I go back to, for me, "Let There Be Shred" and "I Don't Care," there's something about it where I just wasn't doing anything for me. I actually had less excitement because of those singles. And then Puppet Parade came back, and then Another Bad Day wasn't bad. I do think it flows. So first and foremost, even up until this point, even though the album kind of teeters at times, I think it does flow. And again, I've only listened to the album once, um, so I would have to go back and listen to it one more time. But This is about like midway. I think most Megadeth albums for me, and I love Megadeth, where midway point is where they start kind of like they do dip a little bit, then you get into stuff that really sticks towards the end of the album.
Yes, because getting into the second half of the album, Made to Kill, I said, "Okay, this is more like it." I said,
Mhm.
"That's easily my favorite song on the album." The intro is excellent on that, and I feel like this song definitely is what they're all about. It reminded me a lot of Dystopia, which we reviewed on this channel. Please check that
Mhm.
out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Definitely check that out. But I said, yeah, I said, this is more like it, especially that and Obey the Call. Heavy and slow. And I love when they sped it up at the last minute on Obey
Yep.
the Call. Yeah, the second half of the album is very strong.
Yeah. W This is where I was getting excited because sometimes there's a lot of bands out there that try to mimic, or a lot of thrash bands out there where, later on in their careers, they kind of sound like they're doing the same thing over and over again. Um, and Megadeth, even though it's Megadeth, they're like one of the four of thrash. The second half of this album definitely makes sure it ties it together and be like, hey, yeah, this is Megadeth, but it's like Megadeth. Like, they're a thrash band, but they're still doing their own thing, and it is strong. It's not like, oh, these guys should have retired 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think the only weak part of the second half of the album for me, where I was like, was I Am War. I
Hmm.
feel like I feel like that probably could have been left off the album and it still would have been fine.
Yeah, it wasn't that, it wasn't bad. I did like. I'm gonna jump ahead here. I did like the way the album ends with the last note. You
Yes.
know.
The last note, I got to it and I said, "This is it." I said, "This is the last song ever." Well,
Hmm.
and the intro is interesting on that, and essentially the song was about Dave kinda saying goodbye and reflecting on the entire history of the band,
Hmm.
which I really liked. And especially an acoustic guitar solo was an interesting choice. I love the outro of it. I think it's not necessarily when the album ends, because we're gonna get into a bonus track, which was an interesting choice. But if I liked as specifically their last song, I really liked the
Hmm.
choice.
Yeah, and before we get into the bonus track, I will say again, I was a little concerned with the couple of the singles, but I think the album as a whole, although not their strongest work, was definitely a good swan song for the band.
I absolutely agree. I don't think the album is perfect all the way through, but it was a nice way to end the career for them.
Hmm. All right, let's get into the piece I know we want to talk about here.
Yeah, let's get into that. Let's get into that bonus track, a cover. When we saw the track list announced, when they announced the album, we saw "Ride the Lightning"
Hmm.
at the end, and I said, "Okay, this will be interesting." And I'm wondering what was running through Dave's head. He probably said, "You know what?" I said, "This is going to be it." People still ask me about Metallica, I'm sure.
Hmm.
So you know what? I'm gonna do my own take on it with music that I helped
Hmm.
create. Um,
Yeah. So I've always said for years that Ride the Lightning has always sounded like a Megadeth song. Like, it's an incredible track. I would argue I've always been a Ride the Lightning over Master of Puppets fan. I know that's probably a very controversial take for some Metallica fans.
I agree.
Um, but Ride the Lightning's always sound like that verse and that chorus is like Dave Mustaine written all over it. And to hear this version, they did a really good job. And I think Dave did a really good job staying within his vocal range as at his age doing so. I thought it was a pretty good cover, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I agree because well, initially when I heard a preview of it and I hadn't heard the album yet, I heard a preview of it and I said, "Oh," I said, I don't know about this." And then I heard the actual cover and I agree with you, Sam. I said, This is actually a pretty solid cover." And I know they brought it down because I wasn't expecting Dave to hit those high notes
Mhm.
that James hits on the actual song. But they brought it down and he sounded good. He sang it very well.
Yes. Again, I think for me, I would have loved to hear Dave do this back in the '80s when he was at his like raspiest and like just he would have, yeah, he could have probably challenged, James there in that like you know hitting making that song, as good as it was. But even still, for something that came, for him covering a song that he partially wrote with a band over 40 years ago, and then we're going to do a cover because sometimes bands do covers and you're like, oh, this is not that good at all. High note, an actual highlight of this album.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was a good call for him just to say, "Hey, I can, I can do a Metallica song. You want to hear it? Here it is, because this is probably the only time it's ever going to happen."
Hmm.
I said,
Yeah. So I guess overall, where would you rate this in terms? I don't even know. Like, so for me, at least, if I were going to look at the last three albums, I would say this is not as good as Dystopia. Um, it might be. I would have to sit down and listen to the Sick, the Dying, and the Dead again. But at this point, those two are like kind of like neck and neck, and where these two albums sit.
"Yeah, I think it's kind of it's up there with I really like Dystopia, as
Yes.
we said when we reviewed it. I haven't heard the album before this, but I would say I would kind of put it right in the middle.
Hmm.
I would definitely put it better than better than Super Collider for sure. I think
Yeah.
anything is better.
Um, but no, I think this is a good listen. I will be making sure I listen to this a few times, and we will definitely be revisiting this one at the end of the year.
Definitely. There is one more song which we have not heard because it's not available to us, but it is on the Target edition of the album. It's called Bloodlust. We'll try to hear that at some point. But yeah, let us know in the comments below if that's a track worth checking out. As I heard about it this morning, I said, "Oh, I didn't know that was out there, but that's cool."
Agreed.
But yeah, that's our thoughts on Megadeth's last album. Please let us know in the comments below what you thought of the album. Was it a good way to go out? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Really help us out. Support album reviews like this. We got a whole bunch more coming at you. We had three drop this weekend, January 23rd, as we record this, and we're gonna get to them. Thanks for listening to us, and guys, do not forget to join the Bedlam.